Modern gaming has a dicey relationship with morality, and I don't mean that in the they're going to make you think and do terrible things sort of way. Rather, I mean that the morality systems of many games are, well, bullshit. This isn't a new observation by any means. This began a long time ago with games like Fable and Knights of the Old Republic presenting choices that essentially boiled down to orphan saving or baby strangling. And that worked fine for those games, but those systems have since worked their way into far more mature and serious games like Mass Effect and BioShock. The reason I bring this up is because I'm currently going through my first ever playthrough of Fallout 1, and it reminded me of something I sorely miss in a lot of modern games. Uncertainty. Like legit serious uncertainty as to what the right choice was, both mechanically and ethically. And that's something I haven't truly experienced since, well, Fallout New Vegas. And the fact that I don't have that kind of experience more often is a travesty, because more than anything, Fallout 1 and New Vegas' willingness to not give us easy answers is what made them both classics. To see what I'm talking about here, we're going to have to look at three separate choices. What's best for Junktown, Caesar versus the NCR, and the choice that made me quit my first playthrough of New Vegas. Upon arriving in Junktown, it's made abundantly clear that a man named Killian is in charge, serving as the town's mayor, sheriff, and only merchant. Upon meeting him and subsequently saving him from assassination, you are given a quest to bug Gizmo, the owner of the nearby casino who wants Killian dead because he's slowing down his business. On the surface, this seems like a really one-dimensional problem. However, there's a catch. Gizmo is right. Killian is bad for business. Should you kill Killian, Junktown becomes a Reno-esque boomtown under Gizmo's rule, with business thriving as the town grows. Killian keeps the town isolated and safe, but Gizmo makes the town into a city. Is it better to live safely in squalor or live comfortably alongside injustice? I personally ended up siding with Killian, but there's definitely a case to be made for siding with Gizmo. From a utilitarian perspective, it would be incredibly easy to argue he's right. However, I made my choice all the same, and I stand by it, even if it wasn't my most confident one. But it was because of this lack of confidence that I was able to learn a little about where my true beliefs lie. Next, there's the NCR and Caesar's Legion, and the question of how one goes about rebuilding a destroyed world. The first faction you'll come across is most likely Caesar's Legion as you pass through the recently burned and pillaged Nipton. Filled with bodies, heads on pikes, people crucified, some still alive, and if you try to pull them down, the Legion will kill you. This is Caesar's philosophy in action. Brutal, totalitarian, and imperialistic. Unless you're a special kind of edgelord, this is most likely where you begin to try to work out how to get rid of these guys, and most likely see them as nothing but cliché baddies. This is further solidified when you meet the New California Republic, or NCR, which is essentially America 2.0, complete with all of the patriotism and bureaucracy that implies. It initially feels like a very one-sided choice, one of those orphan-saving, baby-strangling choices I mentioned earlier. Then you talk to Caesar. Caesar is probably the single smartest person in the entire Mojave. He is as understandable as he is unrepentantly evil. You come in to speak with him and rapidly find out that his rationale for opposing the NCR is fairly logical. He hates the NCR because he sees it as an extension of the old world philosophy that put the world in the state that it's in, filled to the brim with theatrical democracy that elevates the corrupt and sycophants that will ultimately bring about the same circumstances that caused the Great War in the first place. He rightly points out that the NCR has no real answers for how to solve the problems of the wasteland, and is ultimately just as imperialistic as him, and in many ways as totalitarian. Finally, he points out that democracy has no place in this world, that it's a luxury of better times. But in an era where humanity is splintered, it needs a single person to rally behind. And he does this by citing the NCR's own success under the 52-year-long presidency of Tondi, and their struggle since her death. I don't agree with his points on democracy, but it does bring up some serious questions. What is it that the wasteland truly needs to survive? Why do we think recreating an old government won't lead to the same conclusions? Are there times where a dictator is truly needed? After all, the historical Caesar he named himself after used dictatorial powers to keep Rome intact before being ultimately killed for abusing that power. But in one of the game's endings, you can bring our Caesar to a very similar fate. Doesn't the ability to kill dictators in many ways serve as its own kind of check on their power? And what is really the difference on a philosophical level between the kind of ruler Caesar wants to be and that Tondi was? Caesar came nowhere near convincing me to join his side, cause, you know, f***ing corpse piles. Also, that whole slavery and women as subhuman things wasn't a good look. But he did succeed in getting me to not ally with the NCR, because in a lot of ways he really wasn't wrong. But in spite of that, I still don't really know. The NCR may be bureaucratic and imperialistic, but maybe those are the things needed to remake the world after this kind of disaster. Because waiting for it to naturally come back together on its own clearly isn't working. It's all really dicey. Finally, we have my big choice, and it's one that arose almost by accident, but it's going to require a bit of backstory. The first time I played New Vegas, I roleplayed as a character who, for all intents and purposes, wanted to get paid and get out. Pure and simple. I did not lust for power. In fact, I outright rejected it. Too much responsibility that would keep me too tied down. I just wanted to make enough caps to supply myself for my adventures throughout the wasteland, and that's it. Think chaotic neutral, erring on the side of true neutral. This led me to working primarily with Mr. House, the head of New Vegas. He was offering plenty of caps and was already in charge, so I didn't see any need to change anything, or at least my character didn't. I did every mission he handed me, even the more questionable ones because, well, caps are caps. It all continued until he tried to give me one last mission. Destroy the bunker housing the last remnants of the Brotherhood of Steel on the West Coast. Now, here's the thing. On the way to meeting him for the first time, I had acquired a companion named Veronica. I loved Veronica. She was charismatic, funny, and had a fascinating backstory, plus she was pretty damn useful in a fight. She was also a low-level member of the Brotherhood of Steel, an organization that she had repeatedly told me yes was flawed, yes was stuck in their ways, and yes could be absolute dicks, but was filled with people. People she loved, people she cared about, people she earnestly believed she could turn around and improve the lives of. The Brotherhood was her family. And now Mr. House was asking me to kill that family. I could not see myself finishing this game without Veronica. This wasn't going to happen. And here I painted myself into a corner. I wasn't going to kill the Brotherhood for House, but I wasn't about to side with the NCR or the Legion either for the reasons mentioned before. There was one out. Kill Mr. House and take control of New Vegas myself, thereby acquiring the exact kind of power I had been purposefully avoiding the whole time. I was put into a position where I had to either betray Veronica or betray myself. I literally could not decide what to do. So I exited the game to think it over. And then a week passed. Then a month. Finally, a year. Do I ruin the life of someone I care about for my own freedom? Or ruin my life for the freedom of someone else? Am I truly that selfish? Or that selfless? Every time I thought about picking the game back up, that choice hung over me. Still too heavy to make. So I didn't make it. Which, yeah, is kind of embarrassing, and yeah, I know it's just a game, but this is why you commit to playing a role, so you can get these kinds of situations and maybe learn something about yourself. Ultimately, I learned I'm not that selfish, but I'm not that selfless either. And the fact that New Vegas could force me into having such a complex and weighty realization, for me, is perhaps the strongest piece of evidence I have ever seen that games are art. Games have the capability to ask us challenging moral questions and then demand an answer truthfully. And even if we refuse to answer, that is still, in its own way, an answer. No other art form has this power. This is something games and games alone can do. And the fact that we've taken this unbelievably powerful tool for making people face their own personalities and beliefs and relegated it to binary morality systems where we can only choose between helping an old lady or murdering her for $5 is tragic. Fallout for me is proof that games can serve to be the art form that encourages the most self-reflection. We have a tool here for creating thought experiments so complex and compelling that Socrates would have lost his goddamn mind. Now, all we have to do is use it.